The successor to Monster Hunter World, Monster Hunter Wilds, will finally be in our hands in just a few weeks' time. Much like we did with Rise, I wanted to give World one final send-off as we step into the 6th generation of Monster Hunter. While this is one of my favourite games of all time, it's also kind of bad in a lot of areas. So join me as I look back at the incredible positives and surprising amount of negatives World and Iceborne had to offer. Quite literally, your first moments in World are spent clambering around on the back of Zora Magdaros. Not exactly the most exciting start, I know. But soon after, you're dropped into a breathtaking environment with a sense of scale never seen before in the franchise. I can only imagine what it must have been like for veteran players from the 4th generation or prior to witness this transformation for the first time. I mean, we literally went from this to this. The contrast is staggering. Even now, more than 7 years later, World still holds up against most modern games. While some may prefer the aesthetics of older titles, there's no denying that World remains visually stunning no matter what you compare it with in the industry. From sound design to atmosphere, Capcom truly created a living and breathing world that perfectly encapsulated what Monster Hunter games should be, at least in my opinion. And with World came the Slinger, a tool that allows the player to equip various types of ammunition found in the world and fire it. Bear in mind that the Clutch Claw, which we'll discuss later on, was not in base game World, so you couldn't originally use this ammo to wallbang monsters. There was a level of interactivity the Slinger had with environmental hazards, but there weren't many of these. The main one you'll probably know is the boulders in the ancient forest. So what was the Slinger's purpose? Because shooting monsters with it was rarely useful and certainly didn't do much damage. With all that being said, you might think surely it was pretty useless back in base game, right? Well, that's what I thought before writing the script and researching the ammo types in more detail. Did you know that Bright Moss lets you track monsters moving underwater and also soaks up Namielle's puddles? Did you know Torch Pods soften Lavasiof's armour so you don't constantly bounce off its body? Or, and I did know this one but never particularly used it, did you know Puddle Pods wash away the mud on monster's body like Barioth? Pretty much every single ammo type other than the basic stones have a unique purpose or useful mechanic relating to monsters in each region. Yet most players either didn't know this or did know it but choose not to use them in this vein. And why is this, you may ask? The game does tell you what these things do, and as mentioned, they are quite convenient during a fight. Furthermore, it's not like it takes much time to fire a puddle pod at a Barioth, literally a second or two. So why do people only ever fire ammo if it's piercing pods or bomb pods? Personally, I think it's damage. When you hit a monster with a bomb pod, you are instantly rewarded with big number. With the puddle pod, you don't. Even though the puddle pod will give you more damage in the long run, being as the defensive mud armour has now been washed away, players don't really associate the two. Ammo such as the flash pod gives you an immediate visually impactful result, much like my analytics when you like and subscribe. I mean, when you send Rathalos crashing back down to the ground, you prevent an annoying mechanic and are also rewarded with a big damage opening. Melting Lavasiof's armour with a torch pod, in practice achieves the exact same thing. However, it's executed in a more subtle way, and I truly think that's the reason why you likely didn't know about it. The Slinger is of course returning in Wilds, but now it has much more practical use and engages with the environment in a more seamless manner. So the team certainly learned from World and made improvements moving forward. Another mechanic newly introduced in World that's returning in Wilds is mantles. 2 mantles could be taken into a hunt, and when thrown on they will give the hunter temporary bonuses depending on which mantle you equipped. Whether that be a ghillie to stay hidden, resistances, or more airtime, everything has an apparent purpose. Now, thanks to the Rocksteady and Temporal mantles in particular, these things are kind of busted. I mean, wearing a fire monster scales for fire damage reduction makes sense, but a straight up get out of jail card mantle is maybe a bit much. Don't get me wrong, you already know I permanently have one of these things equipped, so by no means am I above using them. But are they good for the game? I'm not too sure. Of course, there is always the argument of, if you think they make the game too easy, don't use them. However, that's also a bit of a reductionist thought. Many players see mantles as yet another grey area of quality of life versus trivialising the game, and I can see why. In essence, I really like them and I believe they do make thematic sense for the most part, and they also don't have crazy impact on a player's experience thanks to their limited activations and decently long cooldown periods. But what do you think? We all know mantles are also back in Wilds. Are you happy about that? Let me know in the comment section down below. To change pace a little bit here, to a slower pace to be precise, What I would deem as a pretty obvious lacking point in the game is of course story. This isn't anything new to the franchise, as plot has never been the game's focus. Sure, there's pieces of lore scattered around, and arguably things did get a bit better in Iceborne. With that being said, in general, you're not really playing Monster Hunter for the story. While it is technically a subjective matter, during your first playthrough of the game, most players would agree that you run into a few slow spots that if anything just make things feel tedious. Whether that be picking up the monster tracks or the dreaded Zora Magdaros quests, these can make any player want to slam their head into a wall. I've heard from many people that these specific moments have made them put down the game. I think the Zora Magdaros quest is a cool spectacle at the very least, but we can agree that it simply wasn't executed in a way that resonated with most players. On top of this, cutscenes are not skippable. This isn't the end of the world for a first playthrough. Sure, I agree the option should be there, especially when the story is weak in the first place, but we can deal with it, is what I would usually say. However, when cutscene time totals to over an hour, and that's just base world, replaying through the game can feel extremely tedious. Seeing the hunters go through the same monotonous dialogue over and over again is not fun. Personally, I think the option to skip a cutscene should at the very least be provided after you've seen the cutscene once already. Furthermore, this system created problems when playing the game with a friend in multiplayer. Friends can only join your quest after you progress to a certain part, activate the cutscene, and finish watching it. This lost time soon stacks up, and it's certainly not fun sitting in camp doing nothing while waiting for the green light from your mate. I mean, look, all in all, this is one nitpick in an otherwise amazing game. It's never truly changed my overall opinion on the game, but I would like it changed in Wilds nonetheless. Oh, and leave the handler alone. Nah, like seriously, I mean it. Oh wait, who's that? Later on, we then got Iceborne, a new expansion introducing a plethora of new content and mechanics, including but not limited to the Clutch Claw, Grinding Lands, and these guys. Okay, let's talk about it. Moving forward, each one of these topics have been discussed here on the channel already in the past. I don't want to bore my returning viewers, but I also don't want to leave new viewers in the dark. As a happy compromise, I'll focus on each topic's main points. If you then want to hear opinions in a bit more detail, I'll add the relevant videos in the video description, and on-screen ask pop-up cards should be in the top right. Okay, let's start with the Clutch Claw. This tool has been the cause of so many debates within the community, it's crazy. The Clutch Claw lets you grab onto a monster to perform a tenderizing attack or to send the monster flying into a wall. The wallbang side of things is fine, I guess. Learning the most ideal time to use this rewards the player with big damage and a lengthy opening. You can also send flying monsters crashing back down to the ground when used correctly, which is yet another great bonus. On the other hand, this mechanic also ties the player into feeling like they need to wallbang whenever possible, and this results in a monster being pretty much permanently enraged throughout the hunt. I think new players especially fall for this trap and end up taking way too many hits while trying to pull it off, and this is what likely adds towards even more frustration towards the Clutch Claw. But as I mentioned, once you've got the hang of it, it's very easy to do every time. The tenderizing side of things is another conversation entirely, and the brand new wound system of Monster Hunter Wilds does fix this mechanic in my opinion. Put short, my issue with tenderizing is that it breaks the flow of combat for an arbitrary reason. Stopping the fight to reapply a debuff like this feels wrong. The way it works in Wilds makes so much more sense in all aspects. Constantly attacking a part of a monster should naturally weaken it over time, and then once the wound is created, it being manually popped by the hunter or closing over time with healing makes more sense. Well, I know it still doesn't technically make that much sense, but it's better than tenderizing, expiring after 3 minutes like nothing happened. Overall, the Clutch Claw was a little bit slow and clunky, but it really wasn't as bad as people say. I personally have always been fine with it, but I can't lie, it feels very nice seeing the general sentiment of the Clutch Claw being improved as we move forward. Next, the Guiding Lands. Where do I start with this place? So effectively, this is the endgame grinding system of Monster Hunter World. Well, the true grind was decorations, but I'll get onto that later. Effectively, here is one giant zone with all the different biomes spread across it. Pretty much all monsters, tempered and non-tempered, can be found or summoned to that area, allowing you to spend hours on end in the Guiding Lands without needing to leave. In concept, it's great. You can hop in, fight whatever random monsters spawn, and leave whenever you feel like you've had enough. The issue here was based around materials. Zones would level up based on your activity within those zones. Increasing the level would then cause stronger monsters to spawn, all the way up to tempered elders. The materials you needed were vital in augmenting your weapons amongst a few other things. Sure, getting a hold of these was a slightly long process, but fine for an endgame system. The issue is that as you leveled up areas, other areas leveled down. This meant you may need materials from one level 7 zone, with your next upgrade coming from a completely different zone, meaning you had to go back to grinding even more levels. In some cases, you might have needed multiple zones leveled up. It could get annoying for sure. And of course this process would start all over again if you decided to augment another weapon. Since Iceborne's launch, multiple changes were made to make the process smoother. Capcom also allowed us to lock your Guiding Lands levels so they wouldn't fluctuate while you're grinding out particular areas. Extremely helpful. So if you think this place is rough now, trust me, at one point it was way worse. Overall, I'd say the Guiding Lands were a great idea. And again, I want to stress it wasn't something a player needed to do or engage with for the most part. In fact, I'd wager most players didn't spend any more time here than they needed to. After all, the average hunter probably sticks to the story and quits as soon as they finish. It gets a thumbs up from me. Now, before we talk about Alatreon and Fatalis, maybe I need to bring up decoration farming. I'll be honest, I'm not looking to get into too much detail with these as the debates will never end. But here we go. Historically in Monster Hunter, decorations could be crafted with monster parts. Your charms then become the RNG farm. You'll know all about this if you played Rise. World on the other hand decided to swap these two around. Now you craft your charm and RNG farm their decos. In the most non-biased way I can, I'm going to put forward both sides of the argument. For my sake, please take these interpretations with a grain of salt. In favour of RNG decos, the consensus is that decorations are additional perks on top of your core build, which is made up from armour and charms. Essentially, crafting your charm finishes the build's baseline foundation. Finding decos after the fact perfects the build and gives you something to work towards when all else is said and done. Charms do need to be swapped out for different builds, so the RNG becomes annoying in that sense. Decorations, however, will be acquired constantly, so the likelihood that you find a bunch of useful multi-purpose decos is quite decent. The RNG charm argument, however, puts forward the concept that decorations are part of your core build. Crafting decorations should therefore be built into the game. It's not nice spending hundreds of hours to simply never finish your final build. On a personal anecdote, after 700 hours of game time, I only just recently got my first attack +4 deco a few weeks ago. And some people told me I was lucky for that. Other players can go thousands of hours and never even see this decoration. Furthermore, these players would argue that charms are supposed to add icing on the cake. The charm is overall less important for your final build compared to decorations, and so failing to roll the perfect charm impacts you a lot less. So that's both the arguments, relatively speaking. And here's the thing, both sides are correct. It's not a black and white situation. There's no yes or no answer. I do have my personal bias, but I don't want to show biasy to either point in this video, so you'll have to ask me for my opinion during a live stream. If you do want to continue this conversation in the comment section, feel free to do so, but please keep it respectful and bear in mind the subjectivity. And it goes without saying, but don't get carried away. Thanks. Right then, let's discuss the big guys. Alatreon and Fatalis have probably had more coverage on the channel than anything else discussed today, but they are such highly unique encounters that it wouldn't feel right leaving them out this video. These two showcase what challenging post-game encounters should feel like. A new player can't just run ahead first and expect to brute force them. These obstacles can only be overcome with practice and preparation. So with that being said, why you can access them at Master Rank 24 will always baffle me. It's way too early to unlock them and almost tricks first time players into thinking they should be attempting to do it. I get Capcom wanted the fights to be accessible, but did it cause more damage than good? I personally was a brand new player when Alatreon came out, and I mean that in a literal sense. I only started playing the game a couple weeks before that update went live. Naturally, when I finally caught up to the content cycle, I jumped in without hesitation and got destroyed over and over and over again. Frustration built higher and higher until I said, you know what, forget it. Then shortly after, Rise was announced, so I thought, what's the point? It wasn't until the Return to World campaign at the beginning of last year where I came back to the game and finally beat both Alatreon and Fatalis. I know for certain that this experience is shared by many of you from reading comments left on my previous videos, and it's the very reason why I'm helping players take them down with assistance of you guys every single Sunday leading up to the launch of Wilds. If you haven't yet joined one of our live streams, I recommend you to do so. They're a lot of fun, and on the 22nd of February we'll be giving away one final copy of Monster Hunter Wilds. I've personally never been challenged more in a Monster Hunter game than fighting these pair of dragons. If you are yet to take them down, I sincerely recommend you to try it before the end of the month. Join us in a Discord server and let me know if you managed to do it. Link in description. There's so much more we can dive into across Iceborne and base game, but I think we've covered the main suspects. As such, I now want to speak more candidly on what Monster Hunter World means to me. World was my first ever Monster Hunter game. Despite originally not enjoying it and quitting, I later gave it a second shot and it quickly became one of my favourite games of all time. However, it gets way deeper than that. Who would have thought that this game would later influence me to create a gaming channel on YouTube and completely change my life? I understand that might sound like an exaggeration, but truly my life these days feels way different to, let's say, a year ago. It's not like my living situation or career have shifted or anything along those lines, but the mental side of things for sure is in a better place. Every single day I have people leaving kind messages, engaging in conversation and just supporting me in general. And then these past couple months have built way further on this than I expected. Since November the channel has literally doubled in size. Our Discord server now has over 300 members, live streams have an amazing set of regular viewers, the list goes on. And it all stemmed from turning on my PC and talking about my favourite game. I've already had the pleasure of meeting some truly amazing people, and you know who you are for sure. Truly, I can't thank you all enough. But with that being said, the journey's also not over. In fact, I feel like we're still at the start line. Wilds will be the next step in our long road, so I hope you'll all continue walking it with me. I've got a lot of ideas for videos in Wilds. The first couple of weeks might be a bit chaotic, so I'm really hoping I get an early access key. Please pray for me on that note. In any case, feel free to let me know what you'd like to see from me around release week. I'm going to be streaming as much of my first playthrough as possible, starting from launch day on the 28th. So make sure to slide on by and say hello. Everyone needs a bit of second monitor content anyway, right? Thanks for watching.